I'm going to be talking about Agile testing and automation the easy way. I'm the product manager for Worksoft, and so I get to look over the complete product suite from certify to our impact to execution manager and analyze. So our agenda today is we'll talk a little bit about Agile 101, because the cool thing about Agile is there's a lot of acronyms, and so sometimes you need to explain, how you're using a term. We'll look at enterprise testing perspective with Agile and kind of what is a hybrid Agile approach, which a lot of people are working with, and then look at Worksoft and Q&A. And obviously we'll do a demo in the middle. So in this webinar, I'm going to talk about kind of the life cycle. So with Agile, there's the concept of a theme, which is, they're usually very broad set of requirements and goals. They contain epics, and based on your tool, sometimes you have epics. Other tools, maybe like Rally, take your epics and split them into features. But this, if you look at this from a perspective, my theme could be migrate the payroll system to SuccessFactors from PeopleSoft. And I have two major features I need to in my epic. One is to process overtime, and the other is to process holiday overtime, because they're handled differently. And then what happens is those get broken down into stories and tasks, and that's a lot of times where we start doing our actual configuration work and our development work. And so features usually split into multiple stories, and stories have multiple tasks. So those are the small agreed upon work that you try to do within 2 weeks, like overtime for hourly workers, overtime for regular workers, overtime for holiday, all those different small things. So we think about the hierarchy, the highest level, you have themes, you have multiple epics in a theme, and ideally you want to push an epic or feature out into production in an agile way versus waiting for a theme to complete, which kind of would be like waterfall-ish. And then we build those based on stories. So if we think about end-to-end testing, what happens is a lot of times modern application development, we think about user experience, we think our enterprise systems work together, there's security and maintenance updates that have to go along with our new development, and then we have functional regression testing, and then at the lowest level, unit or API testing of the code. And what a lot of people think of is that just spans across from the sprint teams and application development, across pre-prod, and everything just goes into production. And what people talk about is fail fast, and then reiterate, fail fast and reiterate. And that works well for really small Agile teams if it's not a mission-critical system, and it doesn't really mess up data in the system of record, right? But in reality, when we talk about enterprise class end-to-end testing, we think about these in two different phases. The actual development and test phase, we think about unit tests or API tests, the application function and performance testing. So this is like really, does the software meet the requirements? Is the story and acceptance criteria being validated? And it's usually a single user looking at that for specific results. And so that's very story-oriented. So if you're working on a very small application, maybe adding a one extra button or field on a mobile app, this is great. You could probably push it in production. But in reality, with our large enterprise customers, when you are deploying an ERP package like your finance or your human resources, your sales, your materials management, all of those modules are really large and span multiple applications, multiple ERP packages. So with business process end-to-end testing, we need to think about how does the test cross multiple applications. If we make a change, does it break the finance module that everybody shares, things like that. And then we need to make sure that nothing breaks, because failing fast in production is not really an option for mission-critical systems. So if it's your sales orders or your manufacturing plants and your distribution centers, the Agile fail fast and fix really isn't appropriate. We actually want to make sure the systems work correctly, and many times we have some auditing requirements behind that. Do all that validation before we move into production. So for us enterprise app people, Biz DevOps 2.0, a lot of people say, we've got that extra step. So when I say end-to-end testing, I literally mean mobile to mainframe, to make sure that anything you do on your mobile devices is interacting with the backend systems, your back office, and your applications are working correctly together, and your end-to-end mission-critical business processes work. So You know, we know mainframes are there. A lot of times there's Office, like Excel, automation that goes in the middle. You've got thick clients, you've got browsers. And so end-to-end testing for us is really that entire workflow across multiple technologies. So why is enterprise testing so hard to automate? What we find is it's really hard to understand the larger end-to-end business process. They're not well documented. They tend to be very complex. They can span package applications and legacy applications. They tend to be very UI driven because a lot of the things like sending sales orders go through the system, but when there's exceptions to be handled, humans log into user interfaces and make decisions. And so it's a lot of UI testing, and UIs tend to change a lot, right? And there's a lot of cross-team collaboration. So in a HR system, if you're dealing with overtime pay in that, it's not just the HR system, it has to work with the finance systems, the payroll systems, the accounting systems to move the money and all those type of things. There's a lot of cross-team collaboration to make that happen. And there's a lot of concerns about upstream and downstream systems. If you make a change to payroll, does the accounting system accrue it the correct way? Does the automatic deposit system move the money the correct way? And the other thing is people say, it's so hard, I have no time to do this. It's just too complicated. So, you know, many people opt to a great start with automation, and then they find out, wow, this is much harder than we thought. You know, traditional testing tools that required scripting, it was just very hard for non-technical users who want to participate in the workflow. And this is a problem. In Agile, we talk about business analysts and product owners being part of the sprint teams and being part of that technical workflow. So they need to be able to do their jobs, right? Other people say that my tests are brittle, so I spend more time maintaining them than running them. Or they don't scale. I can only run it on my desktop. I need to run it on 50 desktops in parallel. It's too hard to customize things. It doesn't seem to work with my application under test. There's lots of things people complain about when they start out in automation and maybe have a false start and end up with shelfware. So there's a different approach, coded versus non-coding approach. And we've had our customers validate this. And what they found is when you're looking at building tests, you don't want to have to write a lot of code to test your system, because at a certain point, you now have a code in your test cases becomes a system with bugs in it, right? And the other thing is the velocity. So what they found is, you know, to automate an application, they were getting 1 step an hour when they were using a scripting-based tool like UFT. They tried some other tools, they got a little better velocity. But when they tried Worksoft, what they found is because we're an object action framework, we're not code-based, they were getting 28 steps an hour. So their actual velocity to actually build the automation and keep it maintained was much greater by changing the paradigm of going to a no-code approach for that. So hybrid Agile, right? So some people call this Scrumfall, Wagile, different things. There's a lot of debate out there. So are you really Agile if you're not moving every change into production one at a time and, you know, failing fast and redoing them? And in reality, yeah, but it's an interesting concept, right? How can we make something that's traditionally slow and very well invalidated, a waterfall approach, more agile? So if we think about this end-to-end process, these days, when you look at a large enterprise application, you think about how do we plan for it, how do we do the preparation, explore what has to happen, do the realization and build phases, we then test it and deploy, run, and feedback. Well, we tend to break these things down into there's process libraries. So here's the module for overtime processing. Process libraries have steps, so how do we do overtime for salary employees versus hourly employees versus holiday time, right? But what we need to do is change this and think about if we're talking about our functionality in small modules, we need to do the same thing with our test automation. Our test automation needs to mirror those modules, so we work on small bits of automation that validate at the story level and coordinate across the feature itself, okay? And then the nice thing is once the tests are automated, they can be consumed on demand, right? But what happily goes wrong? What makes the turtle fall upside down, right? Well, many times the testing tools don't work well. They're going code-based, so it's very hard to do the automation with code. You have to have a lot of specialties. It takes a lot of maintenance. Or they just give up and throw money out the window and say, we're just going to manually test everything, and therefore it's not particularly reusable or scalable. And manual tests just take a lot longer to run, right? So that's not a real good approach. We need to think about doing this with an automation tool and test automation. So if we think about Agile roles, there's always a big debate. In a traditional, very small Scrum environment, it's easy to say, yes, the developers should do unit tests of their little bits of code, and maybe these stubs and mocks around them. But and when it comes to enterprise apps, like what about the center of excellence? Do we keep it or delete it? Like, do we distribute it? Do we not do it? But in reality, at that process step automation library level, the testing center of excellence is really important. And this is definitely an enterprise problem. This is a problem that happens when the application or the workflow spans multiple applications. There's multiple ERPs, there's legacy systems. All things have to work together. So what we find is for enterprise scale, you need to have a center of excellence that helps you variabilize and harden and maintain your tests, because traditionally sprint teams on the left, once they're done with the story, they're done. They don't revisit it every time. They don't tend to maintain it and maintain the tests. Those things tend to be an asynchronous activity of something fails, put it in the backlog, prioritizes the next sprint, right? And then many times sprint teams don't think about testing in a pre-production environment and looking at that integrated, holistic end-to-end approach. So there's a lot of value in doing that, and it's especially important when you have large-scale enterprise Agile going on. So if we look at this from a very practical perspective, there's change management along the way. You make a change to your process library, your process steps change, maybe because you're changing the way you're handling holiday pay. That means you have a corresponding automated test case that mirrors those changes. Well, what happens is there's requirement changes at your theme level. We want to change the way you do holiday pay. That turns into new test cases and new interface specs. You may have small functional tests, maybe like if it's SAP in your ABAP code. But then what happens is the small unit tests roll up to functional tests, because we need to make sure larger bits of workflow work. Not only do we see it in the HR system, but the payroll system and the finance system. And then we need to make sure that end-to-end process is not broken. And what happens is this means our automation library is responsible for validating that, say, a change to the way we do holiday pay doesn't break something downstream, and the data coming from upstream works. Well, these are always very iterative. So we'll always be maintaining our test automation libraries when we have changes in functionality. We don't want to change them because the system's brittle. We want to tie these updates to our automation, to our step libraries and our process libraries. But it's a very iterative process that people work through. So this is where we think about traditionally regression tests, user acceptance tests, and integration validation. Well, in large-scale enterprise apps, you still need to do that, right? Those things don't go away. Yes, in a small Agile team doing a mobile app with one button change, maybe not so much. But in reality, people are much more risk-averse for large-scale enterprise applications, and they need somewhere for the regression test, user acceptance, and integration to live. So with hybrid Agile, this could be, scaled Agile framework. This could be any of the SAP methodologies based on it, or Ascend, Activate, things like that. What people think about is, I've got a pretty complex set of stories to handle processing over time, because it's changes to the HR system, changes to the payroll system, changes to the finance system. And so you have multiple stories to describe this, and then multiple sprints to accomplish those stories. You may do small functional testing there, and then you come to your gap. And SAP, they call this the wave with the quality gates, and Scaled Agile Framework. In your PI planning, you have your hardening sprints, and that's where we make sure everything is working together. And this is where you can actually touch and feel, and end users can buy off and in process, and that gives us an increment. We can then move into production, and you work through the next one and the next one and the next one. So testing actually does make sense in Agile. It's just we're going to do it a little bit differently, but we need to make sure that everybody can do it, and it's easy enough to do. It's not something that's very hard and coded, where we can't get business analysts and QA and product owners involved earlier in the sprint cycles. So at this point, I'll go over to the demo. So inside my backlog here, I have a different set of sprint teams, and they're working on sales orders. So if you think about a sales order, there's a lot of things that work together to create a sales order. It's not that you have a sale, you have to have materials and pricing, you have to have your delivery, so not only can you buy it, it exists, it's priced correctly, and it goes across. So these things can be done by two different sprint teams. So what happens is these sprint teams need to start working together to actually do the work and do all their validation of their stories and their features and their acceptance criteria. So I want to walk through what would be a day in the life of two different sprint teams who need to coordinate and test in an agile way. So over here, I have my sales order system. So I have Capture here. What Capture will do is allow me to record this. So I'm just going to put a quick name in here called DP4, because that was my JIRA number, so I can keep track of it, right? So the idea is the end of the sprint, so the last couple days when the system starts coming together, the business analyst or the product owners, members of the team can actually see the increment of I need to create a sales order. So what they want to do is walk through the system and record the expected behavior. And this will allow you to define your test plans, your acceptance criteria, mapping the test plans, and your test cases. So what you'll notice is I'm using Capture here. And as I walk through the application, it's giving me screenshots and giving me a narrative of what's happening. So this will help me do a couple things. This is going to help me build my automation, and it's going to help me document my processes. So it's pretty easy to use. All I did was click the record button and start entering my data. And so I've created my sales order header. I'll enter my item. So this is assuming that my materials and my pricing is working together with my sales order system. I'll click Save. And I've now created my order. So this is what one sprint team would do to prove the system's working. So I clicked over on my sales order, and maybe I'll add a comment, keep the sales order for delivery, right? So ideally, as I'm going along the way, I'm documenting my system. So this is great. So what I want to do is this sprint team is just going to go save this into Analyze. So what this means is I'll start this workflow, and I'll keep track of this. And then what happens is another team, say working on the delivery, they'll need to go work on those things. Okay? So over here, I'll use a different application to do my delivery. So what I'll do is I'm going to restart, and there's a different team working. So in this case, I'm going to record the delivery. So I'll come into my SAP system, and I'll start my delivery process. And I need my order number, 37171, and I'll save my order. So this is an example of a different sprint team working to create the delivery. So remember on my JIRA board, I had one team creating the sales orders, one team creating deliveries. Well, ideally, these people, these stories are going to coordinate together to create a feature. So I'll send this up to Analyze also. So what this means is my teams have kind of started working independently. They're functionally looking at their small bits of code, but then we need to figure out how to coordinate and work together. So I'll come over to Analyze, and I can see here is my DP4. Here's my sales order, and they went through and they created sales order, and a different sprint team created the delivery. So from a functional test, I'm thinking about the way features work. An order is not good unless it has pricing and a delivery. What I'm going to do is actually join these things together. So what I want to do is join this one to this one and say connect activities. So now I have a nice workflow. I'm going to create the order and create the delivery. So this end-to-end process, what I'm going to do is document it. I'll create my demo sales order, and I'm going to go and generate my automation. So what happens is the Center of Excellence team, they're going to start looking at how does this change affect production. A change in delivery may be affected by a change in the sales orders. Sales orders may, if they change their data, may affect the delivery on the other side. What's important is to understand how they work together. So, and that's really hard for people to see sometimes. So here's my sales order system. And remember, one of the challenges people have is documentation of the system. So what we do is we can generate your business process documentation automatically. So I have a screenshot of, I was at the SAP screen, I clicked my sales order, and then I started navigating through my application, and you'll see I started entering my data so someone understands how it works, and I can see all the different parts, the items being entered, and then the status line. I can see my comments that was added there. So this allows us to help transition to the QA team who's doing the bits of automation, right? So what we would do, say, in a typical life cycle is I generate my automation and analyze. So I'm going to come over here and go grab that. So I'll say log into analyze and import my automation. There's my automation I created. I'll select it. And this is part of my Fiori 1610 application. So I'll select that. So I'll line up my objects so I get nice reusable code. It imports. Okay. So now I have my automation. So let's see what happens here. So I created some different things. I had the different parts of my application. So if we look, there's these different components here are the different screens. So what happens is we kind of automatically start documenting and create the individual worker processes. So in addition, we'll have our overall driver processes. So along the way, we can see each one of the steps, and then we can see that there's a driver process that calls them all. Okay. There we go. There's my driver process. So I can see here, this list of subprocesses aligns to my picture and analyze, and align to the script I created. So now I have documentation, and now I've got my automation. Now the trick is, this automation may need a little bit of work, because if we look, the sales order process here required data from a previous step. So when I look at this, what I'll see is I entered some data into the sales order process. Well, I typed as the user in the sprint about a number, but in reality, this is the order number, right? So what I'm simply going to do is select a variable and say, at runtime, don't hard code this, use that variable, okay? So that order number came from the sales order screen. So let's see what that looks like. I created my test, and I clicked in the message bar, because that's where the sales order number is. So what I want to do is actually convert that into a store. So I'm going to save the status bar. So I'll save that message that came back. And what I want to do is I'm going to go find the order number in there. So in my documentation, I can see the narrative said standard order, the number has been saved. So what I want to do is I actually want to go through and add a new step to grab that order number out of there. So I'll just use a text command, and I'm going to do a find substring. So I'm going to say look for standard order, and then the number has been saved. And I'm going to get that from the status bar that I just stored. I want to save that into the order number. Okay. So pretty easy. You notice I'm not writing any code. I'm doing this in a very English way. So what happened is we automatically detected all the fields in the inputs through here. We saw they click the save button, the message bar. I'm going to do that, store that into the status bar. And I'm going to take the status bar and look between standard order and has been saved to get that order number. And that's what I use down here in my the final parts of my test. I use the order number here. So this is basically me working on a test. I've now hardened it. I've variabilized it. So you notice I didn't write any code. Seems pretty easy to do. And now I want to make this run. So what I'm going to do is I created a shared process already to load and log into my system. So I was going to save time and not make you watch, have you watch me do that. So what I'm going to do is drag and drop the process here. So now I have a driver process that loads the browser, sets my capture, logs on the SAP for me, and then runs my test. And that will run my both my SAP in the browser, my Fiori system, and my delivery in the back client. Okay. So if I click run, it'll start processing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the execution window open on the right so you can see it run. So what we'll see is it starts entering the data. This is my shared subroutine to log me in. And then it's going to start walking through my Fiori tiles. And it's going to start running my test. So you'll notice a nice thing here. I'm not putting any sleeps and waits in that. The runtime engine and Certify understands how to understand if fields are available, if the screens are ready in that. Those types of timing and synchronization issues are kind of the secret sauce of why this works so well for us. You can see I'll hit the save button. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the order number, 37172, and that should be used in the rest. Oops. And then keep running. And I had something wrong there. And I'll keep running, and my process will keep going on. And now I'll enter my sales order number on the right and enter it on the system there. So, oops, looks like I had one small bug. Oh, I mistyped the order number there. Okay. Well, obviously I can fix that and make that work. So what the idea is this is easy enough to do, easy enough to debug, sort of the substring, standard order. Yep, I misspelled standard order there. Well, that kind of sucks. Oh well, I can fix that quite easily. I'll just go to edit step, and let's go look. If I spell standard order correctly, standard space order, there's my standard order, has been saved. So guess what? This will work this time, right? So pretty easy to debug. So if you think about maintenance, is this easy to maintain? Yeah, I think so. I had an error. I was able to click it. I went directly to the screen and fixed it. And so all we have to do is rerun our test and see what happens. So come back over here. I'm going to go run this test again. So obviously this time it's going to work because I don't have a typo in the name standard order. So we'll just let it run. So the things we talked about was how would an Agile team adopt it? Well, I had one sprint team do a capture on the Fiori screens here to create the sales order that was associated with one set of JIRA stories, a different set of JIRA stories of people who's working with the SAP GUI, and they're doing the delivery. And what I did is I loaded those to analyze so I could see at a high level how are these things being constructed. Now the nice thing in Analyze, when you have duplicate processes or things are happening the same way, we'll automatically consolidate them so you don't create too many tests, you create just enough. Now at this point, the customer reference will enter the data, and then this time it should work. I shouldn't have a typo. I'll get my sales order. Oops, show my execution window. Yep. And then it'll type it over here, and it'll do my delivery. Okay, there we go. So my order's been saved. So my test was successful. So what we saw here was full life cycle. I did the capture, I documented it in my PDF, I generated the automation, I built my test. It didn't run the first time. We saw how to maintain the test, pretty easy. I clicked the errored step, it went back to that step, I fixed it, and then I ran it. So now it looks like we're ready for the rest of our automation. So hopefully it'll look pretty easy. So when you're building technology that's very scalable, what you'll notice is we didn't write code. We used what was called the object action framework. I was able to just walk through the UI, objects were identified automatically, everything saved into very centralized index database, so it's easy to reuse processes, like I reuse my login process. It's very modular. People develop hundreds of processes in a week and then can leverage them. There's a change to the UI, make one change to the object, and then everybody reflects it, so it really lowers our maintenance costs. And then there's a lot of extensibility that can be done. Now, the nice thing is I use my capture and for my automatic discovery. So that means that my sprint teams can do my capturing, and then we go from there. So why do we think test automation is for everyone? It's, well, we've removed some hurdles. You don't have to become a programmer to do it. It's easy to use. It's codeless. We auto-discover the business processes and documented them for you, so you have them for training purposes and for explanation. It's easy to maintain. We can see my test failed. I did a right-click. Brought me right to the step. I fixed it and reran it. And the nice thing is this works the same across all technologies. I don't care if you're testing mainframe or mobile or Fiori or Microsoft Excel, it's the same technology to do it, and that's just as simple, right? And then easy to scale. We've got people who run thousands of tests every night, or basically 500,000 steps in an hour to actually run all their tests on a continuous basis because they're interested in doing validations of the system every night to see if changes and configurations are affecting things. And obviously it's easy to integrate. We integrate with SoapUI, with UFT, Selenium. We integrate with ALM, Panaya, R2M, Solution Manager, ServiceNow, and Jira for defects. So we really wanted to make sure that we cover the ability to plug the automation into the larger ecosystem for you. Oops, there's my demonstration slide. So easy to integrate. So what does this mean? So this means that when I build these tests, we can now push these into my CI/CD platform. So I can run my certify end-to-end processes from Jenkins, so you can run them every night, or TeamCity. We can use SoapUI and leverage that to run our say API tests that you need. We can run our mobile tests on different device clouds. You can scale them out. We have great integrations into ALM and then to the defect tracking systems itself. So based on how your organization works, or maybe different parts of your organization work, we can handle your tool chain for that. So a good example of scaling is we have a customer who needs to run all the regressions every night because they have a very large system and it has lots of stakeholders, so they do lots of changes, and they want to make sure that they validate the system end-to-end every night. So they do massive parallel execution. They run about 132 machines, and they kick off their certified processes to verify that all 50 stakeholders' data is being processed correctly, which is basically 400 core processes and 500,000 business steps run nightly. So we really find that people are moving towards this continuous delivery and continuous testing and continuous deployment on the highest end. And what they want to do is they want to run full validations every day or run them in events. And we've made sure that we're very easy to operate with. We have REST calls to kick them off. You can do them from command line. So it makes it easy to integrate with different technologies. So if we kind of recap, what would this look like if I take this test and deploy it? The idea is I had multiple teams working in sprints. They started building their automation. They then associate their capture files and analyze so they can see as the sprint's complete, their features, that functionality becomes completed. And then during their quality gets to their waves or their hardening sprints and their PI planning, those hardening sprints are running those. A lot of people are using Jenkins to kick those off. So the events are based on Jenkins saying the code's complete, kick off the test, get the results back, and then they deliver an increment, and they go to the next increment and deliver, the next increment and deliver. So it's definitely an iterative process. And the key is that any test run from a previous set of functionality or increment has to be regressed with every future change. Because with enterprise apps, a change in a feature, an epic, really affects multiple applications working together. So if we go back to our HR example, changing the way we process holiday vacation implies that it's no longer part of a holiday pay versus vacation pay versus hourly overtime. Those things all get recorded into the accounting system differently. So we have to make sure when we make a change, we don't break anything. So it's very iterative when we go through our functional tests, our user acceptance, our regression, and end-to-end processing. So every time you build a set of tests, they need to go into your regression libraries you run every night to make sure there's no unintended consequences. So what I showed you is using, Worksoft Certify, which is our end-to-end testing tool. It's 100% code-free. I talked about analyze and use our auto discovery to figure out what to test and build automated tests. And to complement that, we have Execution Manager that you'll use to run your tests, say from your Jenkins or maybe your scheduled nightly builds. BPP will give your compliance report. And then if you're in SAP, we can actually use Impact to do some risk analysis